I'm on, but I can't open up the Excel file for
That's in
some reason.
that's in your email. Oh, you can't open it at all?
Well,
Yeah.
again, I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about that Excel file. If you spend any amount of time on it at all, you'll be somewhat disgusted by it. I'm going to use it's like I said, format wise, and to say that my formulas are not elegant would be putting it mildly. But I just want to use it as to emphasize some talking points here in the beginning of this thing.
Okay. Well, I think we
And
should get started. Yeah.
yeah, I'm going to get started, and I am going to start with that. Um, I also just want to make clear that I don't want to be monopolize this thing. I want this to be a discussion, and what I hope to end up with here is what this committee needs to accomplish in 2025, and get that down and make sure we're working toward that. And then not only what the end result or goals are for what we need to accomplish, but a little bit of discussion about how we might do that once we have that set. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share a little bit of information on current operational budget. Now, there are some numbers in here. I wouldn't get too lost in the numbers. Ed's reported the numbers that are official. I said one of the goals is to have timely, accurate, and actionable financial information. Timely looks like it's always going to be a bit of a struggle, frankly, because we still don't have March. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Jay.
Yeah, I just said timing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're still working on the first 2 months of the year. So, but I'm popping this up. I don't know to the degree anybody can see it because it's got a whole bunch of crap in there. But if you can, these columns here are so far this year, right? This is pretty reflective of the stuff that's been reported, that Ed has reported. And then the things I have are blue are things I want to talk about. This section sort of highlighted in green is where I want to be able to put in adjustments, right? So things that we know that are not yet reflected in the financials. Because if you took this all the way down, or if you look at the income statement from Associa, 2 months in, it appears that we're about almost $38,000 to the good in that revenue versus expense. But as Ed pointed out to me at the end of last meeting, first of all, there's $90,000 owed from previous year back to reserve, and there are expenses coming up this year that are not captured in the first two, or won't be actually, I don't think, in the first 4 months of the year. And what I want to do is build a model and get the group working on what it will be versus what the picture is today. So in example of this, this special assessment was not in the budget, right?
Right.
But it's there, and it's primarily for insurance, and that comes in later on. We have this on the revenue side, these late fees and interest, and I have a question as to if this is based on the trouble people had signing up for the special assessment payment, even though they try to make it, are we actually going to enforce those late fees? Or are we going to tell people, some of it's based on outside of your control, or what we think is outside of your control? And I don't know the answer to that, and I don't need that answer right now.
Yeah, well, we'll give it to you. Associa says that they're going to reverse all of that. Well, January, February, and March.
Yeah.
Okay.
As of April, the late fees will apply.
Yeah.
All right. So then that should go into January, February, March. Here, and here. as reversing that back out.
But you gotta make sure those late fees are associated with a special assessment and not HOA fees.
Okay, well, somebody has to do that. I don't see that information, but you're right. It's a good call, Ed. And again, I don't necessarily want to winnow this all down to exactness today. I just kind of want people to look at how I'm building this, give advice as to where it's coming up short like that. Let me know where it needs improvement. But that's kind of what the exercise was here.
Yep.
And then if you get out to the forecast end, that takes into account any of the actual year to date versus budget, and then anything we know that's going to be different. However, in cases where we have underspent budget, utilities would be a good example if we roll that up. I didn't take a KISS for that because I don't know whether those are trend or timing issues on the billings for utility versus the budget, right? So year to date, we have underspent our budget by 65, year to date being 2 months, by $6,500. But I got no idea if that $6,500 is going to hold up or if it's going to, disappear in August when we're having to cool things down. I don't know what the impact on dumping fees are going to be under the new trash contract. So I didn't take any wins for any of that, although there may be some, and we need to figure out whether there are or are not. Here you will see in this line, here is the increase that I believe is right for the new maintenance contract. However, what is not in here is any of Alfonso's payments in January, February, March. I don't know if they're reflected in the income statement in January and February, or if those will pop up in March and April, and if so, to what amount. So there's no adjustment in there for Alfonso. But
March will be 3,100, and I don't know about April yet.
Okay, so those will be big numbers. If I just put 3,100 in here, you'll see that this takes us to a trend line of $24,000 more for the year than what we were trending, right? That's $24,000 a new expense that we did not have in the budget.
Tim, that's not a constant 3,100 per month.
No, I just put it in here. The rest of this is based on what I believe was I heard, and I don't know if this number is correct, but on a $12,000 per month fee from so that's the difference in that 26 almost $2,700 is the difference per month in the new contract versus the old contract.
Got it.
Somewhere down here, and again, somewhere down here, there's under contracted services, I made up a number for trash. Again, this was on somebody's kind of saying something at some point at $25,000 a year. I don't know if that's accurate, but
way off right now. It's 1,200 per month, starting May 1st.
All right. So anyhow, I will work to get these right numbers in here.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a whole bunch of places I don't know where to go with them, right? So I will talk about repair and maintenance. And Jim, thanks for joining. Again, through 2 months, we're in great shape on this, but I don't know if that holds up. I don't know if that's something we can say, hey, that 4,000 is a win that we have for 2025, or that 2,000 a month is a win, or all of that's going away and going in another direction. And so I'm going to
think we'll use every penny of that.
Okay. All right. And then we have some of that. We have some KISS and landscaping early. So anyhow, I'm just trying to build this out to eventually get us to a model that says, in this case, if just based again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on these specific numbers, But at this rate, we're forecasting a $73,000 deficit expense to income.
Largely because of what we owe the reserve.
No, that does not have any payback on the reserve at all.
No,
that is an additional 70. Now I need to vet all these numbers.
Yeah.
I need to even vet the formulas a little bit because part of this isn't really making sense to me. But if that's true, how do we find that money? So anyhow, this is a model I'm trying to build out. I'll shut up now a little bit, take a little, ask you all to comment and give me some ideas as to whether this seems to make sense, whether this is in the right direction, things I missed or things that need to be included.
I love the actual versus actual to budget year to date, because that gives you an exact picture. Well, it's not exact because we're 2 months behind. Didn't they already give us March's numbers?
No, not yet. Usually comes for the meeting.
All right. So I love that. I think that part of that $35,000 deficit that you're looking on total operating expense, a lot of that will come out, when you adjust the number for trash and when we adjust the number maybe for Alfonso a little bit. I can't think of anything else that would bring that down right now.
Yeah, I just want to, this actual budget is actually, we're almost $35,000 under what our budgeted costs were, which gives us a kiss of, almost 60. But again, all that looks like it's going to reverse as we go forward. Ed, you're probably closer to these numbers than anyone. Any thoughts on any of this?
I think it's probably a little not as favorable as that because you if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't had a chance to look at your spreadsheet, that the special assessment income is counted in that number.
Well, yes, but so is the insurance costs. So they're both in here.
You added it in versus the budget?
Correct, because it's in the actual column you have in the, let me see if I can get there. So here.
Yeah.
Do you have a column number? I can't, that's sorry, it's too small.
Sorry, yeah. So actual year to date through February, I have that our expense for general liability was $14,518. Okay. And that was not budgeted in the budget. And then I also have, up in income, the special assessment. So both the assessment and the liability insurance are in this under actual cost because they're showing up in the income statement.
Okay.
So can I ask a question under the insurance? If you go to row 27, Tim, just scroll down a little bit.
Yep.
All right. So we've got comprehensive, liability, and D&O. And I don't see the comprehensive in there.
Well, I didn't see the comprehensive in the income statement.
Interesting.
The expense.
It's an expense, yeah.
Wait, unless it showed up someplace else.
It's a pretty big number.
Liability insurance in the financial, because the financials don't have the general liability, the large insurance policy. The naming's kind of challenging here, but so if you look at line 5445 for the insurance, that's the $14,000 policy.
Correct.
Is the cheapest one. So it looks like I'm trying to look at your spreadsheet.
174. It still sounds low to me, but okay.
Well, again, that's exactly why I have these questions. So I will look for a line for comprehensive insurance, right?
5445 is the what do you call it number?
Well, according again off the income statement, 5445 is identified as general liability insurance.
Oh, you know
premiums.
what so that could be like something like a general / liability.
Right.
It could be.
Yeah. So it might include both. Because when you multiply the 14,518, you come out to 174 per year, 174K. And I believe that's where we settled in, somewhere around there. It was close to 200,000 anyway.
But if you look at the spreadsheet, the financials, actual annual budget, okay. So the DNO is $4,146. What do you have for DNO?
$4,146
Per year.
Yeah, that's what's it the forecast in the budget. Again, that's just taking the budget number. There's no adjustment to it,
Okay.
and just plugging it and just playing it through.
Yeah.
Well, I will continue to work on this.
Yeah.
Ed, if you ever get a chance to kind of crack into it a little bit and critique it, I'd be happy to get your feedback on a more finite basis. Like I said, I don't want to spend all the time on it. I just want to know if it makes sense, and if we get it right, will it be a useful tool?
Yeah.
So Tim, I like I shared, I've been running the tool that I created last year, which has an annualization. So I don't have the September, October all blown out because I find it a little bit confusing to really get to understand it. So I'll try and bump up against each other, but I'm going to run with what's comfortable for me. Yeah,
I did. And you sent me yours. I just didn't want to start changing what you're working on, like adding things or subtracting things or changing numbers. I wasn't comfortable doing that.
You still don't have it? Because
No, I have it. I have it. Like I said, I just didn't want. I wasn't comfortable manipulating your information in any way, shape, or form. I wanted to do this separately, and I was able to. I was able to convert PDF to Excel after paying a little money for the programming, so that made it easier. So anyhow, that's kind of this part of the show. I'm going to dump this here now, but like I said, I do want, if somebody looks at this and says, I don't think this tells us anything that we need to know, I don't want to spend the time doing it. If it has value and it gives us direction and it helps us to understand actions that need to be taken, then I'm happy to do it. And again, you don't have to answer that right now. You can send me a note. You can tell me what you think. But I just wanted to get that out there.
Well, I'll give you my opinion. I like it and I could use it. I think it, not that Ed's quote unquote Ed's version is complicated or too sophisticated, but this just seems to give me a better snapshot of everything than, but Ed's is a lot more detailed, I believe.
He has a lot more tabs.
Yeah.
And he's got cool pivot tables and not 40-step if then statements. So,
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
So as Jim will attest, I've been kind of holding his feet to the fire on not spending money unless we absolutely have to. A lot of the stuff that we're doing maintenance wise it's good stuff. It's visible stuff. Most people see it and notice it. But we're not going to do anything big until we have a really good picture of where we are. And I'm just hesitant because my biggest fear is that we're going to have another gotcha, like a sewer line break or, the well, and the work that has to be done on the well. So those are kinds of things that I got in the back of my mind that I'm trying to hedge for, if you will.
Makes all the sense in the world to me.
And, you know, I'll sound like a broken record here. Insurance is still going to be a headwind for us. So,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a big headwind.
Yeah, I was just talking with an association nearby behind Putney's, and they were crowing about their insurance and the rate that they got. And I said, send me the name of your broker, your agent. I want to talk to them because they're smaller than us, but they're similar in terms of how they're organized. And lo and behold, they got to signing the document, and State Farm said, oops, nope, we're not going to issue that policy or those policies. So they're starting over from square one, just like we did last September, October, September.
That was State Farm in our case too that bailed on
Yeah.
it. Interesting.
But don't worry, they're there.
Well, yeah. Or maybe over there, but they're somewhere in the neighborhood. All right. All right. The next thing I had on the agenda to talk about was reserve. And I know, Richard, you had put something together. I spent a little bit of time on it. It told a pretty sad story. But I think clearly we need to dig into that. This committee, I don't know who, when, or how, but we need a better handle, I believe, on reserve than I have today, to understand, you know, where we are. Richard, I don't know if you want to comment.
So, Richard, before you start, can I just say one thing? Sorry. So Richard and I talked about this for a little while the other day, and I think, you know, I've been saying it since day one, and I'm not an expert in this area at all. And oh, by the way, neither are these companies that do the reserve studies. You know, they use some algorithms, and they never visit the place. They pick numbers based on data, and then they extrapolate and they throw a number out there what it would cost. Now, Richard's taken a really good look at that and gone through and said, well, this is high, this might be low, and this is what we could do. But before I put any more words in your mouth, Richard, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, fine. I want to, well, I don't want to preface. What I want to say is I looked at the reserve study. When it came out, which I think was about 2 years ago, several people, it doesn't matter who, in discussions, you know, asked me to look at it, and I offered to. And so I created a spreadsheet, which I think you all have.
Yes.
It doesn't matter, but recreated some of the calculations of the reserve study. And again, we know what we're talking about with the reserve study. It was completed in 2023, and the association has had them in the past. They're very common, but I wanted to understand the cost part of it. The income part of it, I did not reproduce those calculations. I could, but I understood the concept. I didn't need to. And I was concerned about the costs because I felt that the study does a good, and again, people have looked at it to varying degrees. Some people maybe more than me, some less. But it's tedious to look at, and it's hard to see the numbers. But they're there, they're correct, they're fine. But and that was done, so that's the first tab. The second, I think what I called number 2, long-term plan, that was, I would call a first step to, I'll just say, reorder, to reconfigure these items in a way that might be more consistent with the income that we have. And when I say the income, I mean our contributions to the reserve account. This was done around, you know we had an election to raise the fees so we would have more money, a special assessment that failed. So this was a beginning. It's really the first step only to take the list of projects and any other projects that we would add and to, delay, defer, not do them. And this was meant as a tool to perform that kind of plan. And I'll just tell you, it didn't go anywhere. Now, it wasn't exposed to the committee, to the board, or to any committees. It went to a few people. It doesn't matter who. And, the effort was to get the dues raised and to not go this route. And I have no problem with that. In other words, I get the problems. We need more money. I understand. So I'm not pro or for or against any of that. But so this sat. In other words, I didn't do anything with this. Again, Jay and I talked a few months ago. I mentioned this when we talked again more recently, and so I forwarded this what I would call initial step to look at the reserve study and to see if it could be used as a basis for what I would call a more realistic plan. And again, I'm only talking about the reserves. I'm not talking about the operational part of the budget at all. You guys are doing a fantastic job with that. I've observed that in the past. My hat is off to you. Compliments to all of that. But so this is only an attempt to look at the reserve.
Yeah, Richard, I think that the real value in all the effort that you put into this is going to be the next time we have to, quote unquote, have a reserve study done. I think it's a little bit too late to go back to company ABC that did the reserve study and say, hey, you say it's going to cost $600,000 to do the roads. We know it's only going to cost $212,000 or something like that. So the next time the reserve study is done, and I forget the frequency that it's required, I think it's every 3 years, but whenever that's done, we're going to have much better position and much better knowledge based on what you've done to go back and quote unquote negotiate, if you will, because once that reserve study is published, that's the benchmark that's used to determine whether or not the association is 10% funded or 50% or 90%, which is what supposedly lenders look at for buyers when they're processing purchasing a home. It's one of the risk factors that they take into account when they're issuing a mortgage or financing a home purchase. So I think that's really where we're kind of getting our ducks lined up beforehand. Like I said, I think it's a little bit too late to go back to 2023 study and say, hey, could you guys revise this number or that number?
But Jay, do you think there's value in going back to 2023 study and looking at the timing of major repairs that was in that study by, whatever formulas they used?
You're right.
And using whatever logic we have available to us to say this thing that says has to be done in 2026 does not have to be done in 2026.
Absolutely, Tim. Absolutely.
And I think that's part of what Richard was talking about, right? Was reprioritizing, maybe not recosting everything that they cost, but setting forth, really a workable schedule until we get the next reserve study and largely ignore that.
Well, I'll just suggest, this is all correct. Everything that I agree with all of your comments. The purpose. Let's put it the other way, that it occurred, or I think it's obvious to, if you look at the reserve study, and we know that the reserve study called for something like $2.4 or $2.5 million to be spent over 10 or 11 years. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we were contributing approximately $100,000 per year to the reserve account. And we had a reserve, I'm thinking, around $350,000. Right. So if we just do some quick math, we were the way and now we're contributing less and I understand why. So the costs that are in the reserve study are more than double what we have available to us
Right.
at our present rate of funding. So we, in other words, I understand. I'm not. We're so underfunded compared to what the reserve study calls for that again you have I mean I don't know if each year the board does what the reserve study calls for, we'll have zero reserves in just a year or two or less.
Well,
And-
right, but that hasn't happened ever. I mean, the cost. I think if you go back and look at prior ones, I've never seen the actual reserve cost for a year be the up to what the reserve study asked for. Now, maybe that's bad, right? But I don't think it's ever been there.
Well, I agree. I'm sure you're right. I'm sure
That's
you're
it.
right.
Well, looking at a different way is that, no association that I know of or ever heard of in the entire universe is 100% funded. They'd like you to be X percent. Now, whatever that X percent is, but depends on the institution. But God, if we were 50% funded, we would be in such great shape. It would be unbelievable.
Yes.
Right now, round number, we're probably 12 to 15%, something like that, I think. But we're
think
it's gotta-
working. Yeah.
What's that, Ed?
I don't think so. I mean, we're 90,000 in the hole.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Well, right. I mean, right. We don't
What's
have the cash.
90K?
We don't have the cash, but we're showing. I gotta believe our current reserve balance, and again, not that we have it all in cash, is somewhere around 400, right?
It is right around 400. Yeah.
Well, that's got to be more than 12%,
Yeah.
because we don't need a $3.5 million reserve. So,
But you got to remember, Tim, 90,000 of that is unrepresented. So you've got it sitting there. So you're actually around 310, and we're talking here running a deficit of about 70. So I just want to be careful we don't.
yeah. I'm not saying it again. I'm not trying to excuse anything. And I'm not saying, that I think we have to find that 90, and I think we have to find that 70. I don't know where we find it, but I think we have to.
Right.
I want to take a better look at the spreadsheet, and as I say, there are some numbers in there that we probably have to adjust, but we're actually going to be to the good, if you will, below budget on landscaping this year because of the timing of the contract more than anything. Meaning,
Well, maybe. I'm not sure we are, Jay. I'm not sure that's true. I mean, I get what you're saying on the contract piece, but you throw Alfonso's money in there, and I'm not sure it's gonna be much of a benefit there.
well,
Maybe
Tim,
a little bit.
Here's why I'm saying it, and again, this is not taking anything into consideration, but I take a look at the big ticket items, and we budgeted $175K for landscaping and trash. Our expenditure for that, based on the contracts, is going to be roughly 158. So we're already, quote unquote, to the good on that. But there's a little bit of a bonus on that because, again, the 175 was budgeted for the entire year, and January through April, our landscaping expenditures were less than what was budgeted. The trash, as I said, I think the number that you had in there is almost double of what it actually is going to be.
Yep.
So that helps. So I look at those two, forget about insurance because that's a separate thing. The other one is irrigation. And I believe I saw in your spreadsheet that we're on track in irrigation, but you correct me if I'm wrong, because that's a pretty big expenditure.
Yeah, again, on things that I didn't know, I didn't take anything where we had underspent budget and extend that underspend into the forecast. I just put the budget in. If we were under budget, I just used budget because I didn't know enough to say, again, I asked, and I probably need to get with you and Jim and and Louise on some specific stuff to
Yeah.
ask those questions. Is this a trend or is this a timing issue?
Yeah, good question.
Because I don't want to say we're not going to have it and then have it turn out to be a timing issue,
Yeah.
and then be surprised by it. So,
All right. So we just sidetracked away from reserve discussion back to budget.
well, yeah, I'm going to ask Richard if he would be willing. I think I want to have a little conversation with Colleen next week on this because her heart's really in this. And Ed, I don't know where you're at, but I would like to, Richard, maybe carve out some time where we can sit and talk about the work that you've done, some work that has been done previously, and talk about how we put that together again, where we can come to the board and we can say, instead of hemming and hawing about if this, then that, this is where we see things are. Because you're right, Ed and Richard, you said our funding's under 100,000. With interest, it probably isn't under 100,000 even today, and that's not in there anywhere. So I just think a further breakdown, and at some point, we may have to go to Jim and say, here's what the reserve says we're going to spend. You got 50% of that over the next 3 years. What do you need to spend it on? And to Jay's point, what if something goes horribly wrong, right? I mean, what if we have infrastructure issues with plumbing or underground electrical or something like that, I have no idea how much those might require, but things, anyhow, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with what you said. And let me just give an example. The one example of comes to mind is there's a line item in the reserve study for the deep well casing replacement. A water well has a steel casing. That casing can fail. It needs to be replaced, or the well needs to be re-drilled. This happens. It's not something you would normally do ahead of time. You would keep a water well operated until it sands up or until the casing has failed. And that's so if it's $100,000, if that's a valid cost, because that's the cost that's in the reserve study, you should, I would say we should keep them, we should not let our balance in the reserves go below $100,000. We should have that available for well casing in case it were to burst. And because that's a critical item in our community. But we don't need to budget the replacement. You do that as it fails. You fix on failure.
Right. And when we did the budget last year, we talked about that. We included it in as a $30,000 ticket item for cleaning and resealing as opposed to a total replacement.
Right. And that's wise. In other words, that is another thing that is done with water wells, and I'm familiar with that. So that's excellent. In other words, that helps maintain the well.
Right.
Yeah, there's routine maintenance that you have to undertake to try to avoid the big expenses, and there are the potential big risk items that you, as you said, you would only undertake if you had to.
Right. So my point is, and I agree with both of those comments, that the item need not be scheduled for replacement as it is in the reserve study. The reserve study is largely to tell us how much money we need and how to get it. But the actual spending on many of these items is as Jay and others have pointed out, we're not going to do them based on what's in the reserve study. And I completely agree. So my point is, if you know what some of those items are, one way is to, in other words, in your budgeting, in your reserve budgeting, is to not go below a certain amount. So you have this more or less emergency fund as part of that. And it might be 100,000, it might be 200,000 that you wouldn't go below, so that you have that for that type of emergency. But that means maintaining a a reserve balance of 100,000 or 200,000 or 300,000, but whatever is determined to be reasonable. Not letting it go to zero, because then we know what can happen. But that's so my point is that's just one item in the reserve study that I would say could be pulled out of the schedule going forward, but noted that the reserves, this much should be left in the reserves to account for it. There's lots of items like that you can pull out, you can delay, and
Right.
but you can make a plan. Now, by the way, I would like to emphasize that I don't, this reserve study is for the life, we'll say, for a very long life, 30 years or more. We might put together a plan that's 2, 3, 4 years, 5-year.
Oh yeah,
something
I think
like
after that,
This
yeah,
type
after
of
that
plan,
you're just right.
this type of planning, there's no reason to go more than maybe 5 years, but because that's what you're concerned about. So that was just my thinking.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. What I'm suggesting is that a few of us get together and try to come up with a format that we all can agree to put these things in, to classify them. I mean, you and I aren't going to make the decision as to whether something gets kicked down the road 5 years, but we can identify those things that need to be discussed in that manner. And I don't know who else would like to be involved in that, but I'm suggesting a little side meeting or side group get together and build out something that we can all look at and understand that we're looking at what we're looking at and how we're looking at it. And the other, I guess the other thing I would say is some of the stuff in the reserve study was repaired as part of storm damage repair. And I don't know what those were, what they weren't, but I noticed, the carports and stuff. Some of those I think had repairs done that may have been paid by insurance that will not now be on the immediate schedule for routine maintenance. But all those things need to be sort of worked through.
I'll be happy to help that going forward.
Okay. I don't know if I have your direct contact information.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, that'd be great.
I'm in the directory, the Casitas directory.
Any other thoughts on reserve? Ed, you unmuted and then quickly muted again.
Yeah, I changed my mind.
No fair.
Very good. All right.
Tim, I'll actually, I just want to reground everybody that in the budget that we approved, well, not we, the community approved, we called out those items after we investigated the reserve fund and looked at what was on schedule. This committee talked about which projects we think we should take on. We looked to the owners of, the committee members that own those type of projects to get the pricing, and we forecasted what that would look like in the budget. And in that budget, it gives us what our final reserve balance would be if everything in the budget worked the way it did, if the projected costs for the reserve items we were going to repair came in at those numbers. So I don't want it to feel like we haven't done this before.
No, I'm not. I
We need
don't
to
think
revisit
anybody's.
But the one thing to call out is the number that we had landed on was about $268,000. Now that's where the 90,000 loan becomes problematic. And then if we don't arrive on the budget, that's where we get extremely low in our reserve balance.
Got it. Yeah, I wasn't trying to suggest that. I was just saying that it feels like every year you got to go after this from the ground up, and it might be nice to have something that has a little bit of a head of day plan. And you're right, Ed, we can't, if we don't have any money, even if we plan it, we can't spend it. But it also may make going to the community easier. Again, I know these things have been done. if you feel that this is already set up in such a way that we'll be reinventing the wheel. We won't need to do that. I'd be happy to have that discussion as well.
May I also add, Ed specifically, what I'm talking about is beyond the current year or even the next year. I'm talking about a multi-year look. You guys all do, I've observed your process. I have nothing to add. I commend the process that the board, this committee, has done on creating the annual budget. I have no problem with any of that. And so if anything I've said goes, caused you to think otherwise, then I did not make myself clear. But I'm talking about looking forward. So I'm not looking, and the board, I don't disagree with the decisions of the board that you people have proposed. I mean, I completely agree with that. So I'm talking about looking several years, and at a forecasted fund balance. I don't think that that's in conflict with anything that you as a group or Ed or you or anyone else have done. If it is in conflict, then I'm not interested in doing it. In other words, I want to be supportive of what each of you has done, and this is in no way meant to be change what you've done. This was an attempt to be additive, not in any way changing your existing process for the annual budget.
Yeah, and if I sound like if I sound a little bit overly passionate about this, I just think we made some really good gains with the community over this past year to get confidence in what we're doing. And I just don't want to undermine that confidence by presenting in a way that makes it feel like we might not know where we're going. And the reserve study is simply that, it's a guide. Once the ratios are established, to Jay's point earlier, once that happens, there's really nothing you can do to it or use it other than a guide. And so I think it makes sense to look at what it's recommending for the next 2, 4, 6 years to kind of say, hey, to Tim's point earlier, all the roofs got blown off and repaired that were scheduled for 4 years from now, so that we don't have to worry about that. I have no problem with that. I'm very, and maybe it's by nature of where I work, very important to manage the message, particularly when I think the community feels confident in what we've done over this past year, given the crisis we faced, and the likelihood that we are still going to have to go back to them and ask for more money.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees with that. I don't think that. Yeah, the intent I don't think is in any way to say this is a big old black hole of unknown and we don't know what we're doing. I wasn't trying to project that either. I think we're all on the same page. Just look at the next 2 to 3 years. Try to bubble up the things that are important. Look at that versus today's funding and figure out where that is, and then give that to the board and say, this is the best we got. What do you want to do? So, all right, we got about 9 minutes left, and I had 2 things left on the agenda. One, we can kind of put off, and again, Ed, I'd lean heavily for you on this, and that is 2026 budget. It seems like a long ways away. It's not that far away. But I want to, at some point in the not too distant future, kind of lock down what we need when. And I know there was a whole checklist that I think, I don't know if you put it together, Ed, or you were working off of kind of what needed to be done when. And I don't know that I have that. But I don't want it to sneak up on us, right? I want to understand where we are.
So that was Colleen's that she shared with me. and it's in the final budget or the working budget that I sent over. That's what one of those tabs are. The reserve studies in there, the budget timelines in there, because I found myself frequently having to go back to those resources during conversations. So I just kept them in the one file for efficiency. So I can resend that to you, Tim.
Well, if it's in the file you sent me, I have it.
Yeah.
I just didn't
Okay.
go to that
Yeah,
tab.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Well, I
Okay.
will review that separately. Again, I don't know. I would take any comments or thoughts from anybody in this group on that topic. But I don't know that we have a whole bunch of time or energy to spend on it at this moment.
I love the idea of getting a little bit of a jump on it. Yeah, I know it's only April, but October is going to be here day after tomorrow, and we're going to be busy as busy can be trying to get it out to the community for approval.
Right. Well, and you know, to everybody's point, to Ed's point, the message that is given every month in the updates needs to be consistent with what the message will be in October, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing I had, and this was an idea that I've heard kicked around a number of times, and it seems like a really good idea to me, but I don't have any infrastructure to put that together, and that is soliciting input from the community on ideas to save money. And I will use this example. We were always a twice a week trash pickup community, and somebody finally came along and said, we don't need to be at twice a week. We can do this on once a week, and we can save some significant money, or at least time that can be devoted to other critical activities. And there was pushback, and there were people who didn't like it. But in the end of the day, the change has been made. I think it is largely today a non-issue, and there were savings gained from that initiative. My guess is there are more of those ideas out there, and to find a way to capture them and then talk about them and vet them and see if there are ones we want to move forward with. So I'm just talking about a way to maybe, how do we go out to the community, ask the right question? You know, I'm not sure I want to deal with a lot of people saying we should be self-managed and get rid of all that stuff. I'm sure some of that will bubble through, but I think there are other ways to attack this. So again, I'm just throwing out their idea, asking people's thoughts on it, and if anybody has an idea how to actually execute such a thing.
Those boat pools.
Well, I mean, somebody's going to suggest close a pool. You know that. Somebody's going to suggest stop watering, you know, which may or may not have validity at some day. I don't know, but I don't know what they all are.
Yeah, there's lots of things. I think even little things, if we get 10 little things versus one big thing, they'll add up. And the one that immediately comes to mind is partly irrigation, partly landscaping, and that is in small areas where it makes sense. And we've talked about this with Louise, with Jim. Go ahead and xeriscape where the grass is going to grow no matter what. It's just always going to be bare ground. So why don't we go ahead and stop irrigating those? So now you're saving on water, you're saving on a little bit of landscaping, you know, saving on
a little bit of maintenance. Right?
Yeah. So those are the little things that we've been thinking about and kicking around, and you know, those will come into play here starting hopefully this year. But there's probably other ideas out there, Tim, like you say, that, you know, we could save some significant amount of money. I know we could save a significant amount of money by spending a little bit of money by putting a pool cover on instead of having all that heat dissipate into the air every night. I mean, especially in, you know, the colder months. But you got to spend $1,800 to save that. But over the long run, you make it up. So, but there's resistance to spending $1,800. So,
well, isn't that a reserve expense?
It could be. I don't know.
It's an improvement. Anyhow, I don't want to get tied up, but yeah, exactly that kind of thing.
Yeah. So as if you want, I could put together a Survey Monkey, then we could print it out so people that are online, we could have maybe associate distribute or Susan distribute the SurveyMonkey link
To the community or
to the community.
Yeah,
That's what I was talking about. Now, it's funny you bring that up, Ed, because one of the things in my mind is we should stop mailing stuff. It should all be electronic. I don't understand why we're printing documents, mailing them, and having them return postage in this day and age. I got no idea.
We're getting killed by printing and postage.
Yeah.
I think
Why are
it's
we?
regulations that you have to, and it might be part of our rules, and I think it might be part of the Arizona Association regs.
I mean, we're still literally hand delivering some things to about 13 residents that don't have phones or computers.
Right. So, I mean,
Well, and maybe that's available at a charge. If you don't want electronically, you want it in paper. And again, Ed, I have no idea what the regulation is or regulations are.
Because I think we talked about that last year a little bit, and I think Christie came back and said that you just can't.
You can't, unfortunately. Yeah.
Well, maybe we can have people opt out. I don't know. I mean, it's stupid to mail me a ballot every time or all this stuff because anyhow. I don't want to. I'm not trying to solve that one issue. I'm just saying. I think Ed, that'd be a great idea. Thank you.
So I'll build it if folks want to try to put together some questions, and I can format it and do a test with somebody, and then we can go from there.
And then that's fine. And then we'll have to figure out who's going to collect because the worst thing you can do is ask people for their thoughts and then ignore them. So,
SurveyMonkey would collect it all, and there's a printout report.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We just have to do something with it. So, go ahead, Jay. Did I cut you off?
I was just going to ask Ed if you wanted to throw out a couple of sample questions on the survey, or how do you want to do this?
Well, I think that's what Ed was asking for.
Okay. All right. I misunderstood.
And I'll build it.
Okay. So we're all going to kind of take an action item to think of questions to put on a survey to residents to fill out for asking them for ideas on spending curtailment, saving money, improvements, whatever. I don't know. You don't want to make this thing too big.
All right.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'll give it some thought. I don't know if there's a way to narrow the responses in some reasonable fashion, but
yeah.
I mean, the way you do that is if you make it a force response, yes, no, like, dislike, like a Likert scale. But you can limit how many texts they can do in a free flow response, but you can't stop them from,
and I don't know that you want to. I mean, if you're going to ask, we might as well ask. And then, I think I can take on the responsibility for gathering responses, even to the most wild things. If it's, we're not pursuing that at this time, just to get some response back out there. But again, thank you, Ed. Why don't we try to? Is a week's time enough time for everybody to give that thought and put those together and send them to Ed?
Yes.
Yeah.
To me, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all I have. What else do we got to cover today?
Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. Kind of wondering why John Barrowman wasn't on. Maybe he had something else going today. But really appreciate you putting the time and effort into this. And thank you, Richard, as well.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Okay. Well, thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thank you. Happy Easter.
Indeed.
Bye-bye.
Well, Jim.
Bye.
Oh, see you guys.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to hang up. So.
When did you shave your face? Huh?
That was actually by an error. I cut my hair off.
Yeah,
cut all my hair off.
I can see that.
And then went to trim up, and whoops, some stuff disappeared. So I took it all off and now it's, and then my wife looked at me and said, "You're growing that back, right?" So,
Oh,
yeah, she shouldn't like my face that much.
I guess I won't say it looks good. It doesn't matter. All right.
See you guys. Thanks a lot.
See ya. Bye.